She didn't choose to become her own shelter. Life simply handed her that role when no one else stepped in. You see, a woman doesn't wake up one day and decide to carry it all alone. She becomes that way over time. The truth is, no one noticed her storm. No one paid attention when the sparkle in her eyes began to dim, when her laughter turned hollow, when the silence between her words grew longer. She kept showing up, didn't she? Looking presentable, saying I'm fine, with such convincing ease that no one dared to ask again, but inside she was crumbling. There's a loneliness that doesn't look like isolation. It looks like the strong woman in your life. The one who remembers birthdays, checks on others, lifts spirits, holds families and friendships together. And yet somehow, when her world gets heavy, there's no one she can call without feeling like a burden. So she stopped calling, she stopped opening up, not out of pride, but because she learned her vulnerability wasn't a priority for anyone else. Her silence became her sanctuary, and it's not that she didn't try. She dropped hints, she gave clues, she left emotional breadcrumbs, but people are so consumed with their own storms, they rarely pause to check the forecast in someone else's soul. She realized that people notice when she breaks a nail, but not when she's breaking down. They hear her jokes, but not the tremble in her voice, so she mastered the art of hiding, hiding pain behind performance, hiding fear behind faith, hiding heartbreak behind productivity, because if she didn't keep moving, she feared she'd fall apart, and no one would be there to catch her. So she became her own safe place, her own emergency contact, her own counselor, her own backup plan, and while that made her strong, it also made her tired, deeply tired, because being your own shelter means you never get to rest. You never get to truly exhale. You're constantly reinforcing the walls you built just to survive. And even when people praise you for your strength, you sometimes wish someone would see past it, not glorify it, but question it. Ask who protects you while you protect everyone else. It's easy to overlook a woman like this. She doesn't fall apart dramatically. She doesn't cry for attention. She doesn't make a scene. She just withdraws a little, talks a little less, laughs a little quieter, until one day she's not around, not because she left, but because she's depleted, because showing up for others while no one shows up for you, it chips away at your spirit. But let me tell you something about her. She may be tired, but she's not broken. She may be alone, but she's not invisible. Even in silence, her resilience roars, and while no one noticed her storm, she learned how to dance in the rain. She found peace in her own presence. She discovered strength in her solitude. She didn't let neglect define her. Instead, she turned it into fuel. There's a beauty in a woman who becomes her own shelter, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. That kind of woman may not have a village, but she has a vision. She may not be surrounded by comfort, but she's covered in purpose. And though no one noticed her storm, the way she carried it with grace. That's a story worth honoring. So, if you ever meet a woman like that, quietly strong, deeply kind, fiercely independent, look again. Really look. Ask how she's doing and mean it. Because sometimes the ones who appear the most composed are the ones most in need of being seen. Sometimes the greatest gift you can offer isn't advice or applause, but presence, just presence, because behind every woman who became her own shelter is a story the world never bothered to read, but she's still here, still standing, not because the storm passed, but because she found the strength to stand in the rain and still rise. She's the one people call when they're falling apart, the one who always answers the phone, even at midnight. The one who somehow knows the right words to say, the right tone to use, the right silence to hold. She remembers the things you forget about yourself. She reminds you of your strength when you've lost sight of it. She listens, not just to your words, but to what's buried beneath them. And the truth is, she does it so well, you'd never think to ask who listens to her, but she wishes someone would, not in a surface-level way. Not in the "how are you?" That doesn't wait for the answer. She longs for someone to sit with her and really ask, someone to lean in, not out, to hold space for her pain like she holds space for everyone else's. Because while she's helping others unpack their burdens, hers grow heavier, and while everyone else feels lighter after talking to her, she walks away with more weight than she came with, but she says nothing. Because who would understand? She's built this reputation unintentionally as the strong one, the wise one, the emotionally available one, and once people place you in that box, they rarely open the lid to see what you're holding inside. They just keep coming back to take, to unload, to be seen. And she lets them, not because she doesn't need anything, but because she knows what it's like to feel unseen, and she would never wish that on anyone. So she listens and listens and listens until the silence in her own life becomes deafening. You'd be surprised how many women are carrying unspoken aches, women who can recite your story but haven't had the space to voice their own. Women who can guide you through your darkness but sit alone in theirs. That kind of strength looks admirable, but it's isolating, because she becomes everyone's safe place, yet finds none for herself. Sometimes she'll test the waters, she'll try to open up just a little. To gauge whether it's safe, she'll drop a vulnerable sentence here or there, hoping someone will notice, but people are so used to her being the giver, they miss the moment. They change the subject, they minimize her pain, or worse, they make it about themselves, and each time that happens, she closes the door a little tighter, not because she wants to, but because disappointment taught her it's better to hold it in than to risk being invisible again. She has trained herself to heal others while nursing wounds that no one checks. And what people often misunderstand is that being a great listener doesn't mean she's okay. It means she's overflowing with what she never got. She knows how to show up for you because she's spent years wishing someone would show up for her. She's fluent in empathy because her life required her to learn it by heart, so don't mistake her grace for endless capacity. Even the strongest vessels have limits. Even the most loving souls need love in return. What she needs isn't grand. She doesn't need a crowd or applause or answers, just presence. Someone who sits and says, "Talk, I'm here." Someone who doesn't interrupt or fix or shift the spotlight. Someone who holds her pain without flinching, without judgment, just like she's done for everyone else, because there comes a time when even the healer needs healing, when the listener needs to be heard, when the one who carries must be carried. And if no one ever steps into that space for her, she learns to bury the need so deeply that even she forgets it's there, until one day the silence becomes too loud to ignore. She'll smile through it, of course, she always does, but behind the smile is a soul whispering, "I'm tired. I just want to be held, not for what I give, but for who I am." That kind of desire doesn't scream, it waits quietly, hoping someone sees enough to stay long enough to hear. Because while she listens to everyone, what she truly longs for is someone who listens to her not out of obligation, but out of love. And when that moment comes, when someone finally leans in, not just to speak, but to understand, that is the moment she'll realize she was never asking for too much. She was just asking the wrong people. She has a full contact list, her social media looks alive, and from the outside, you'd think she's surrounded by love and laughter. The comments flood in, "You're glowing," "You're always out," "You're living the life." But what they don't realize is that she scrolls through those same comments feeling more unseen than ever, because a woman can be socially connected and still feel emotionally abandoned. It's not about how many people know your name. It's about how many truly know your heart. She replies to messages, she goes to brunches, she smiles for group selfies, she laughs in conversations, but when the crowd fades and she's back in her space, that's when the silence comes, not the peaceful kind. The kind that echoes, the kind that makes her wonder if anyone would notice if she disappeared for a while, the kind of silence that reminds her just how surface level everything around her feels. See, the danger in being that woman, the likable one, the easy going one, the supportive one, is that people think she's okay because she doesn't complain. They assume her connections equal closeness, but connection without depth feels like being surrounded by people while starving for intimacy. She may have people to talk to, but does she have anyone she can truly open up to? Does anyone check in when she's unusually quiet? Does anyone notice when her eyes look tired behind the makeup, or when her laugh sounds rehearsed? She's mastered the art of being fine. Because in a world obsessed with appearance, emotion often takes a back seat. And when she's tried to go deeper, to be vulnerable, it's often met with discomfort. People prefer her fun, not her fragile. They want her presence, not her problems. So she starts editing herself, filtering her emotions just like she filters her photos, smiling through the void, responding lol when she's actually breaking. She wonders why it's so hard to be fully seen in a world that claims to value authenticity. Maybe it's because vulnerability requires effort, it requires time, and most people don't slow down enough to notice when someone is emotionally bleeding beneath a polished life. They see her stories, but not her story. They read her captions, but not her silences. And so she learns to retreat into herself, not because she wants to be distant, but because she's tired of giving her heart to shallow waters. This disconnection leaves her feeling hollow, because attention is not the same as affection, engagement is not the same as empathy, and likes are not love. What she craves can't be measured by views or followers. It's that quiet, steady presence. The kind of connection where she doesn't have to shrink or perform or package her pain in digestible pieces. Just someone who says, "You don't have to be okay with me. I'll hold you through the mess." But that kind of emotional safety, it's rare, and in the meantime she pretends, because it's easier than trying to explain a loneliness that exists in the middle of noise, easier than risking disappointment again. So she keeps showing up, warm, helpful, magnetic, but inside she feels disconnected from it all. And the hardest part, most people around her have no idea. They confuse her social energy for inner peace, but they're not the same. Sometimes she just wants to be asked how she really is, and for the person asking to wait long enough to hear the truth. Not rush past it, not change the subject, not compare it to their own, just hear her, sit in it with her, let her know that her emotions aren't too much or too messy to hold, because emotional disconnection doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time, when your feelings are overlooked, when your voice feels lost, when you're surrounded by people but not supported by them, when you start believing that your emotions are better kept to yourself because no one has the capacity or the willingness to understand. But even in that emotional disconnection, there's still a part of her that hopes, a part of her that knows she's worthy of being known, not just admired or praised, but truly known. She may be socially connected, but she's waiting for someone to go deeper, to look beyond the crowd, beyond the highlights, and into the quiet corners of her heart, because what she longs for isn't visibility, it's intimacy, and when that kind of connection finally finds her, it won't just change her conversations. It'll change her life. Her smile is beautiful, isn't it? Bright, warm, inviting, the kind of smile that lights up a room, the kind of smile people comment on. "You're always so cheerful. You have such positive energy. I love your vibe." But what most don't realize is that smile isn't always joy. It's survival. It's armor. It's the one thing she can control when everything else feels like it's slipping through her fingers. Because sometimes smiling is easier than explaining why she's not okay. She's learned how to wear that smile like a shield, and not because she's faking who she is, but because it's what the world expects. No one wants to see the woman who's unraveling. No one wants to ask, "How are you really?" and stay for the real answer. So she gives people what they're comfortable with, a version of herself that's digestible, polished, composed. Because if she lets the cracks show, she knows how quickly people turn away, or worse, how quickly they minimize it. So she smiles in the office when the pressure is suffocating, at home when she feels invisible, in conversations when the topic drifts dangerously close to something too real. She'll crack a joke, change the subject, lift everyone else's mood. She's mastered the art of emotional redirection. She keeps others comfortable at the expense of her own truth, not because she wants to, but because she's seen what happens when she doesn't. She smiles even when her heart is breaking. Even when she feels hollow, even when she feels like no one truly sees her, because there's a deep fear in her that if she stops smiling, if she actually lets people see the pain, it might make them leave. It might make them uncomfortable. It might make them think she's too much. And when you've been left alone in your emotions before, you start learning how to carry them quietly. But make no mistake, behind that smile is a woman who's been through things she doesn't talk about, who's had to pick herself up more times than she can count, who's cried into pillows, walked through storms, and still found a way to show up for others with grace. Her smile isn't fake, it's earned. It's a reflection of her decision to rise anyway, to hold herself together when no one else knew she was falling apart. Sometimes she looks in the mirror and wonders who would notice if that smile disappeared. Who would care enough to look past it and ask the hard questions? Who would stay long enough to listen to the answers? Because what she truly longs for is not pity or attention, but presence. Someone who sees her without the performance. Someone who isn't afraid of her tears or her silence. It's easy to assume she's okay. After all, she's smiling, right, but there's a difference between joy and performance, between peace and pretending. And what she wants more than anything is the space to not have to pretend, the space to exhale, to be held without being expected to entertain, to be loved not just for the light she brings, but for the shadows she's endured. She doesn't want to be the strong one all the time. She wants to be soft, vulnerable, real, but every time she's tried, she's been met with empty responses, rushed comfort, or well-meaning but shallow platitudes. And so, she retreats again behind that smile, because it feels safer to hide than to risk being misunderstood. But still, even through the disconnection, even through the loneliness, she keeps showing up. Not because everything's perfect, but because she refuses to let the world steal her spirit. That smile may be her survival tool, but it's also a symbol of something deeper, her resilience, her decision to not let pain harden her heart, her commitment to love, to hope, to believe in better, even when life hasn't always given her a reason. So the next time you see a woman like her, the one always smiling, always showing up, always fine, pause. Look closer, not because she's pretending to be someone else, but because she's carrying more than she lets on. She smiles not because life is easy, but because she's decided not to give up on herself. And that quiet kind of strength, that's something the world should never overlook. People look at her and say, she's too independent, as if it's a flaw, as if her strength somehow disqualifies her from being loved gently. They admire her drive, her ability to hold things down, her way of showing up without asking for help. But rarely do they pause to ask why she became that way, why she's had to depend on herself so heavily, why there's so much silence in her life behind the noise of her accomplishments. She's not too independent. She's just had to be. She's been left to build a life with no one beside her, not because she chose solitude, but because no one chose her. There's a difference between independence and isolation, but people confuse the two when they don't take the time to understand her. They see her moving through life without needing constant support and assume she doesn't want it. that she prefers being alone, that she doesn't feel the ache of being overlooked. But what they miss is that beneath that self-sufficiency is a heart that still hopes someone might reach for her, not out of pity, but because they truly see her. Not for what she does, but for who she is. She's not hard to love. She's just been loved by people who didn't know how, people who took her strength as an excuse not to show up, people who assumed she'd be fine because she always is. And over time, that repeated absence became familiar, so she stopped expecting to be chosen. She stopped waiting for someone to knock on the door of her heart and say, "I'm here. You don't have to do this alone anymore." Not because she didn't want that, but because waiting too long in silence begins to feel like rejection. So she poured her energy into becoming whole, not perfect, not untouchable, just whole. She healed her own wounds, chased her dreams, built her foundation. But even in that strength, she still wondered, quietly, what it would feel like to be pursued with intention, to be chosen not for what she gives, but simply for who she is when she's not performing. When she's soft, when she's vulnerable, when she lets the armor fall. But it seems like people love the idea of a strong woman until they're asked to love her soul, until they're asked to stand beside her in the quiet, not just cheer for her in the spotlight. And so, she's labeled too independent, intimidating, too much, but none of that is true. What she is someone who learned how to survive without being picked, someone who had to make peace with watching others get chosen first, while she cheered them on from the sidelines with grace. She's not cold, she's not closed, she's just tired of being treated like a backup plan or a temporary option. Tired of being celebrated for her strength, but never invited to be soft. Tired of people assuming she has it all figured out, when inside, she's just hoping for someone who finally sees her enough to stay. She knows how to be alone. She's made a life out of it, but that doesn't mean she wants to stay there forever. She wants a connection that doesn't shrink in the face of her strength, a love that doesn't see her independence as a threat, but as a gift, a partner who doesn't need her to be small in order to feel secure. Because what she's really craving isn't someone to fix her. She already did that. It's someone to walk beside her, to sit with her, to hold space for her, to look at her and say, "You're not too much for me. I see the weight you carry, and I want to help lift it." That kind of presence would change everything, not because she needs saving, but because even the strongest hearts need a place to land. So no, she's not too independent. She's just tired of being misread, tired of being passed over, tired of people seeing her strength and assuming it means she doesn't feel, but she does. She always has. She just got used to building alone, and if someone would only look beyond the label, beyond the illusion, they'd see a woman who's never stopped hoping to be chosen. Not for her image, not for her resilience, but for her truth, because that's all she's ever wanted, to be fully seen and fully accepted exactly as she is. She's not looking for a crowd, never was. The spotlight doesn't move her. The noise doesn't fill her. The attention may come and go, but none of it has ever touched the ache she carries quietly in her chest. What she wants isn't found in numbers or in the size of a room, it's found in presence. In the kind of presence that makes her feel seen, not just observed, understood, not just heard, loved, not just tolerated. There's something profoundly lonely about being admired but not known, about being complimented often but rarely considered deeply. She can walk into a space and be greeted with warmth, laughter, even praise. She can be surrounded by people who appreciate her work, her energy, her light, but at the end of the day, she still goes home to a silence that doesn't echo with meaning. Because appreciation isn't the same as connection, and applause is not the same as being held. What she longs for isn't attention. It's intimacy, and not the kind that's rushed or transactional or surface level. She wants the kind that slows down, that pays attention to the shifts in her tone, the tired in her smile, the silence in her laughter, the kind that notices when she says, "I'm okay," but her eyes don't quite agree. The kind of person who doesn't just ask how she's doing, but actually wants to stay for the real answer, even if it's messy, even if it's heavy, even if it's hard to hear. She doesn't need everyone to get her. She doesn't want to be known by the masses. That's never been the goal. She just wants one person, one soul who sees past the polished version she presents to the world, who sees her flaws and still chooses her, who doesn't get intimidated by her strength or overwhelmed by her depth, who doesn't try to fix her but simply chooses to walk beside her. It's not about grand gestures, it's about consistent presence. The quiet kind, the kind that remembers the small things, the kind that checks in just because, the kind that stays when things get uncomfortable, the kind that doesn't flinch when she opens up about the darker corners of her heart. Because when a woman has spent years being emotionally self-sufficient, it's not romance she's craving. It's safety, safety to be unfiltered, to be fragile, to let down her guard without worrying it will be used against her. That kind of safety doesn't come from being popular or praised. It comes from being chosen, not once, but continuously. It comes from being loved, not because she's perfect, but because she's real. She's tired of connections that only go so far. Conversations that skim the surface, people who like the idea of her, but not the reality, people who say they care, but vanish the moment she stops performing. That kind of inconsistency has taught her to keep her heart at arm's length. Not out of bitterness, but out of protection. Still, even with all that, she hopes. Deep down, she still believes that the kind of connection she desires exists, that there's someone out there who won't be scared off by her strength or her silence. Someone who won't need her to shrink in order to stay. Someone who values her for her presence, not just her performance, because while she may be surrounded by people, the truth is, she just wants one. One person who sees her in a room full of distractions, who listens when she isn't speaking, who notices when she's dimming her light, who reminds her that she doesn't have to go through life unseen, even in the midst of others. That kind of love, quiet, steady, intentional, is more valuable to her than all the crowds combined. She's not hard to please, she's not unreachable, she just needs sincerity, presence, someone who says, I see you, I choose you, you don't have to do this alone. And when that kind of love finally finds her, it won't need to be loud to be real. Because sometimes all it takes is one honest soul to look into her and say, you don't have to keep being strong for me to stay. And in that moment, she'll finally feel what she's always deserved, to be fully known and deeply loved.